warrior's legacy. Some kingdoms fall with a sigh, others burn until their last breath. And some men, even when all is lost, prefer to die standing rather than live on their knees. There were empires that disappeared without a trace, but there were also warriors who, even in defeat, etched their names with steel and fire into the conscience of the centuries. This is the story of one such man. Emperor who never knew peace, a warrior who never lowered his head, a symbol that was never broken. His name was Cuauhtemoc, which in the Nahuatl language means descending eagle. And his story is that of a man who fell as eagles fall, with his talons outstretched, his gaze fixed on the enemy, fighting until the last breath left his chest. Welcome to the warrior's legacy, where legends are not told, they are relived, where the steel of history resonates in every word, and where the names of the brave never die. Before we begin, remember to subscribe if you like these stories of epic warriors. That way you support our channel. With that said, let's continue with the video. The world that Cuautla inherited was not a world of glory, it was a broken, bleeding world on the brink of the Abazanand. He was born around the year 1496. In Tenochtitlan, the largest city in Mesoamerica, a metropolis built on water with canals that sparkled in the sun, temples that touched the sky, and markets where the riches of an immense empire were sold. Ayude. He was the son of Aztec, one of the most powerful Tlatoanis who ever ruled the Aztec Empire, and cousin of the last great emperor before the storm, Moctezuma, Cuauhtemoc. From a young age, he was educated at the Calmeca, the school of the nobles, where the warriors, priests, and leaders of the empire were forged. There he learned to fight with the Ma'al, the obsidian sword that could decapitate a horse with a single blow. There he learned the art of war, strategy, honor, and endurance in the face of pain. There he learned that a man is not worth what he possesses, but what he is willing to give when all else has been lost. Cuauhtemoc grew up knowing that governing was not just giving orders, it was bleeding with your people. It was being at the forefront when the enemy arrived. And the enemy arrived. In the year 1519, bearded men in iron armor and firearms landed on the shores of the empire. They came from across the ocean, from a world that the Mexicans did not even know existed. They were led by Hernán Cortés, a Spanish conqueror hungry for gold, power, and glory. He did not come alone. He brought with him horses, animals that had never set foot on these lands, cannons that roared like thunder, arquebuses that spat death from a distance, and something even more lethal than all that: disease. Smallpox, invisible and relentless, began to kill thousands before any sword could be drawn. But Cortés did not conquer with steel alone, he conquered with cunning. He allied himself with the historical enemies of the Aztecs, the Tlaxcalans, the Totacas, peoples who had been subjugated for generations and who now saw in this an opportunity for revenge. What seemed like an external invasion was, in reality, a civil war orchestrated by a brilliant and ruthless foreigner. Moctezuma, the reigning emperor, made a fatal mistake. He received Cortés with hospitality. He housed him in the heart of Tenochtitlan. He believed that he could control the situation with diplomacy, with gifts, with words. But words do not stop men hungry for empires. The Spanish took Moctezuma as their king in their own palace. The city was on edge. The Aztec nobility, the warriors, the common people all felt the humiliation. When the Spanish massacred unarmed nobles during a religious ceremony in the main temple, fury erupted. The city rose up. The streets of Tenochtitlan became an inferno. The Aztecs attacked with all their might. All their might. Arrows, spears, stones rained down from the rooftops. The gutters were filled. The truth was lost in the smoke and blood. But one thing was clear. The empire needed a leader and not just a diplomatic leader. It needed a warrior. After Moctezuma, his brother Cuauhtemoc was proclaimed Tlatoani. He was a man of war, a respected commander, someone who understood that this was not a negotiation, it was a battle for survival. Under his command, the Aztecs launched a brutal assault on the Spanish. It was the sad night, June 30, 1520, when the invaders tried to escape from Tenochtitlan under darkness. They were pursued, hunted, like animals. The bridges were destroyed, the canoes surrounded them. The eagle and jaguar warriors pounced on them with a fury that had been contained for months. That night, Cortés lost more than half of his army. He wept under a tree, the chronicles say, but he survived. And meanwhile, in Tenochtitlan, Cuauhtemoc faced an invisible enemy. Smallpox overtook him. He died in December of that same year, after only 80 days of rule. The empire had lost 2 emperors in less than a year, and the enemy was still alive, regrouping, preparing to return. Then came Cuauhtémoc's moment. He was barely 25 years old. He was young, but he was not naive. He was Moctezuma's nephew, Cuauhtémoc's cousin, and he had been there for every battle, every decision, every minute of that nightmare. He knew exactly what he was inheriting. Not a throne of glory, a throne of ashes. He was proclaimed Tlatoani in February 1521. In a besieged city, surrounded, starving, sick. The Spanish had returned this time, with more indigenous allies, more weapons, a greater hunger for revenge. They completely surrounded Tenochtitlan. They built brigantines, ships that could navigate the lake and cut off any escape route. The island city became a trap, but Cuauhtemoc did not surrender. He did not beg for mercy. He did not negotiate. He prepared for total war. For 93 days, Tenochtitlan resisted. 93 days of siege, of hunger, of disease, of... The Spanish and their allies attacked day after day, destroying the aqueducts, poisoning the water, burning the temples. The Aztecs fought back with desperate ferocity. They used spears, slings, poisoned arrows, and traps in the canals. Every street was a battleground. Every house, a fortress, every bridge, a field of slaughter. Cuauhtemoc fought on the front lines. He was not an emperor giving orders from the rear. He was a warrior who bled with his people. They saw him in the streets, on the rooftops, organizing defenses, encouraging those who could know, lifting up the fallen, looking the dying in the eye, and promising them that their deaths would not be in vain. But hunger is an enemy that no amount of bravery can defeat. People began to eat roots, bark, and insects. Bodies piled up in the streets. Smallpox ravaged entire families. Children cried helplessly. The elderly let themselves die in silence. And still, Cuauhtemoc did not surrender. He rejected every offer of peace that Cortés sent him. Time and again, the Spanish conquistador promised him clemency if he surrendered the city. Time and again, Cuauhtemoc responded with silence or with arrows. For him, surrender was not an option. Surrender meant betraying the thousands who had already fallen. It meant kneeling before the invader. It meant accepting that everything had been in vain. and never that. Finally, on August 13, 1521, after 3 months of heroic resistance, Tenochtitlan fell, not because its defenders surrendered. It fell because there was no one left who could hold a spear. The last warriors fought hand to hand without weapons, with their bare hands hitting, biting, screaming, until the last breath left their lungs. Cuauhtemoc tried to escape in a canoe with his family and some loyal nobles, not out of cowardice, but to reorganize the resistance from another place to continue the fight. But he was captured in the lake. They took him before Cortés. The chronicles tell us that Cuauhtemoc appeared with his head held high, without tears or pleas. He looked the conqueror in the eyes and told him, according to the translations, that he had everything possible to do his city and his people, that he had fulfilled his duty. That he had fulfilled his duty, and that if they were going to kill him now, they should do it now. Because living as a prisoner of the invader was a life. But Cortés did not kill him yet. He needed him alive. He used him as a ring, as a symbol to control the survivors. He forced Cuauhtemoc to order that the gold of Tenochtitlan be handed over. But there was no gold. The imperial treasure had already been hidden, sunk in the lake, or distributed before the fall. The Spanish did not believe him. They tortured Cuauhtemoc, burned his head with boiling oil, hung him, subjected to unspeakable orders so that he would reveal where the gold was. And he did not speak. He endured the pain without crying out, without begging, without betraying his people. There is a phrase attributed to him, addressed to a nobleman who was also being tortured and who was moaning in pain. A phrase that sums up everything Cuauhtemoc was. It is said that he asked him in a calm, almost serene voice, "Am I in a bed of roses?" The message was clear. If he, the emperor, could endure torture in silence, anyone else should do so as well, not out of pride, out of dignity, out of honor, out of fear of giving the enemy even a single more beautiful victory. For the next 4 years, Cuauhtemoc lived as a prisoner. Cortés kept him close, exhibited him as a trophy, used him to legitimize his conquest. But he also feared him, because as long as Cuauhtemoc lived, the Mexicans had a symbol, a name to cling to, and a memory of resistance. And in 1525, during an expedition by Cortés to the Ibueras in what is now Honduras, Sadara, the conqueror Andurra Villacos Villegat that he could no longer afford that risk. He accused Cuauhtemoc of conspiring to kill him and reconquer the empire. There was no fair trial, no evidence, just actions. Cuauhtemoc was hanged along with other Mexican nobles in the jungle town of Acalan. Far from his city, far from his people, he was barely 29 years old. Before he died, it is said that he spoke calmly. He did not curse his executioners. He did not beg for his life. He simply accepted his fate for what it was, the inevitable end of a warrior who never stopped fighting. His body was abandoned in the jungle. He was never returned to Tenochtitlan. He never received the honors he deserved, but his name, his memory, his spirit, those were never buried, or castas were never buried. Cuauhtemoc was not the most powerful emperor of the Aztec Empire. He did not rule for decades. He did not conquer new territories. He did not build gigantic temples, but he was something more important, Hesanis. He was the last one standing when everything was collapsing. He was the one who looked the invaders in the eye and didn't blink. He was the one who chose torture over betrayal. He was the one who preferred to die in the jungle, far from his home, rather than live like a dog tamed by the enemy. In a world where so many surrendered, where so many negotiated, where so many sought to save their own skin, Cuauhtemoc was the exception. His actions were evidence that not all men are for sale. He was the demonstration that there are things more important than survival, like dignity, like honor, like the memory of those who fell before you. His legacy is not measured in military victories. It is measured in what he represents. He is the symbol of resistance to oppression. He is the reminder that even when all is lost, the way you face defeat defines who you are. It is the voice that tells future generations that no matter how much power the enemy has, no matter how much it hurts, no matter how much it costs you, there are lines that will not be crossed. There are knees that will not bend. There are heads that will not bow. There are heads that will not bow. Cuauhtemoc knew he could not win. He knew that Tenochtitlan would fall. He knew the Babro-Rapuyubi Empire would crumble, but he also knew that the way you fall matters. And he fell fighting. He fell standing. He fell like a warrior. He fell like an emperor. He fell like an eagle. An eagle with its talons outstretched, with its gaze fixed on the horizon, without fear, without regrets, never surrendering. Centuries passed. The Aztec Empire turned to dust. Tenochtitlan was destroyed, and on its ruins the city of Mexico was built. Temples were torn down. Codices were burned in Huato. Language was persecuted. The ancestral religion was banned. Everything that was Cuauhtémoc's world was erased, buried. But his name survived. It was passed from mouth to mouth, from generation to generation, in whispers, in songs, in stories told by the fire. It became a symbol, an inspiration, a battle cry. When Mexico fought for its independence from Spain, 3 centuries after the fall of Tenochtitlan, Cuauhtémoc's name was remembered, Moinibom. The insurgents invoked him as an example of resistance against the oppressor. When Mexico faced foreign invasions in the 19th century, his name resonated once again. When indigenous movements fought for their rights, Cuauhtemoc was their banner. Not because he was perfect, not because his empire was just beam, because it was not. The Aztecs were also there. Conquerors, they also subjugated peoples, they also shed blood, sad blood. But because in his darkest moment, when everything was lost, when surrender was the easy option, he chose dignity over life. And that is what makes him immortal. Today his image is on monuments, on banknotes, in street and school names. But more importantly, he is in the collective memory of a people who learned from him that defeat is not the end if you face it with honor, that you can lose the battle and still gain something more valuable: your humanity, your principles, your name, your principles, your name. Cuauhtemoc lost his empire, he lost his city, he lost his life, but he gained eternity. Because as long as there is someone who remembers his story, as long as there is someone who is inspired by his resistance, as long as there is someone who refuses to kneel before injustice, Cuauhtemoc lives on, not in flesh and blood, but in something more powerful, in spirit, in memory, in legacy. The world he knew has disappeared, but his shadow continues to walk among the ruins of Tenochtitlan, reminding us that there are battles that are lost but are still worth it. That there are warriors who fall but are never defeated. That there are names that time cannot erase, that conquest cannot destroy, that death cannot silence. Cuauhtemoc was the last Aztec emperor. He was the warrior who fought to the end. He was the man who preferred to burn rather than go out. He was the eagle that descended upon the enemy knowing that he would not return. And in that fall, in that last light toward death, he became eternal. Not all empires deserve to be remembered. Not all kings leave a legacy. Not all warriors inspire Sada in future generations. But Cuauhtemoc does. because he did not fight for gold. He did not fight for personal glory. He fought for something greater than himself. He fought for his people, for his land, for the memory of those who fell before him. And when it was all over, when he was tortured, humiliated, executed in the jungle like a criminal, he did not break, he did not betray, he did not beg. He died as he lived, with dignity, with honor, with his head held high. And that in a world where so many choose survival over principles is what makes him a legend. If this story ignited something inside you, if you felt the weight of his resistance, if you understood that there are defeats more glorious than 1,000 empty victories, then you are already part of this legacy. Like if you believe his memory should live on, comment on which other warriors in our history deserve to be remembered with this same strength. Subscribe because here, at the Warrior's Legacy, legends do not die. They are forged in every word, in every story, in every name that we refuse to forget. This is the Warrior's Legacy, where history roars with steel and legend, where the fallen are never forgotten.